afternoon, Gaye, and thanks for coming here. Yeah, so what I want to first talk about is growing up in Devon, and that sense of isolation and growing up in a very small town, Bideford, on the coast of Devon. What was that like?
It was a bit isolated from, well, exciting things, and even back as far as when I was a little kid and into the Beatles, I felt a bit like sort of away from everything. It was all right, you know, growing up by the seaside and everything, but as I got older, I wanted to, you know, go and listen to music and, you know, do things that you could get in bigger places that you couldn't get in Devon, for sure.
I mean, was there a sense that pop culture was like an escape?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. But it was just something that was exciting, and, you know, you knew it was somewhere, but you had to go and find it.
I mean, how would you find it in the 60s? You say, like, the Beatles. Was the Beatles the first band you kind of discovered?
Beatles first, yeah.
Was that just like sort of little smudgy clips on TV?
No, the first I heard was I was in Bideford Park, and my mother took me to the park, and I was only about, I don't know, about this big, and I overheard some other kids, some older kids, singing "She Loves You," and I didn't even hear the record. I just heard them singing it, and I was going, "What's that? That sounds different." And then I was going, "I want you to get me that record." And they went to Barnstable, and they came back, and they said, "It's I Want to Hold Your Hand now. The other one's finished. This is the new one."
That's a weird way the pop culture's working.
Remember, it's clear as anything. You know?
So you had to go to Barnstable to buy a record?
Well, I think they used to go shopping to Barnstable anyway. I think there was a little record shop in Bideford. It had that sort of perforated cardboard walls and a little booth, and you could go in and listen to the latest hits. I remember they also got me my first 12-inch vinyl, which was with the Beatles, and I was so excited. I remember having a dream the night before, and what it was going to look like, and it was kind of really big and white and sort of like kind of made of worms, and I thought, well, I don't think that's right. So when it came out, it's just like a big version of the other ones.
Was that disappointing?
No.
Well, what was it that appealed to you about the Beatles initially? Was it the melodies, or was it a sense of...
Yeah, melodies and just, you know, it was just sort of something more like, you know, younger people would identify with, as opposed to, my father liked Frank Ifield, and mother liked Russ Conway, and, you know.
That's quite hip, isn't it? I mean, they're pop stars from only 6 years before, aren't they? It's not like they didn't understand pop culture at all.
Well, it seemed like they could have been out the art to me.
yeah. But was there also like a sense the Beatles were offering some kind of freedom or escape? You know, like, because they had longer hair and they looked like they were having a good time.
It was like a different way of life, you know. There was just a whole different vibe about it. And, yeah, different hairdos and things. And, you know, the older generation would be grumbling about them, which had to be good.
And from that, was that the portal, the door that opened into pop culture?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And then, of course, with all the other things that came along, and I think when I was 13 in a youth club, and we'd be listening to the Rolling Stones and The Who and Kinks and all that. You know.
But none of these bands ever came to play locally. What would be the closest place? Would it be Bristol? Or?
Probably, yeah. I was too young to go to gigs then, of course, but when I did start going to gigs, Exeter was the nearest, and then Plymouth, and then Bristol. So when you 40, 60 and 100 years, and miles.
It could feel like 100 years.
Yeah.
So what bands would you go and see? Is this the early 70s now you start to go see bands play?
Yeah, so we'd see Hawkwind came down, Cockney Rebel.
Surely Hawkwind can't have been the first band you saw?
No. Oh, no, it was... it would be local bands, you know, and local discos and things. But the first big band I saw was a little festival in Woolacombe, you know, on the open air thing on the coast, and it was free. And a lot of local people were a bit disgruntled because they thought they didn't have to pay to get in, but now that's the name of the band. It's free.
Well, they thought free, we're playing for free. Yeah.
And there was like 3 or 4 support bands, like local bands, like the Amazing Blondell, and I can't remember what the other ones were called. Luther, I think one was.
What sort of impact was that to see? I mean, this culture you've been into that point in time, about 5 or 6 years, to actually see it in its raw, live, high volume format. That must be pretty exciting. Yeah.
This is a band that I've actually, you know, seen on TV, and wow, you know, here in Devon.
Were people? Was it the same for everybody that was there, or did you feel a particular?
I didn't really know many other people. I went with a boyfriend at the time on his motorbike, and so I didn't really sort of mix with anybody else. I think we just got there and watched them, and
Then left.
Well, I can't even remember that well, to be honest.
I mean, did you think any further than this? Do you think you love this kind of culture, but do you actually think of being part of this culture, whether it was playing music or doing any kind of art? Was it making you think that's the way for your life, really?
Yeah, I always wanted to listen to music, and I was doing art. That's what I was kind of like got on best with at school, and then I did a foundation year in Bideford as well. So it kind of that sort of started there, and then I kind of I was at Torquay doing a further 2 years of graphic design. I started learning to play the bass just because I wanted to, because it's what most excited me about live bands at the time.
Was the bass?
Yeah. If you stood right in front of the amp and you could
feel the vibration. Yeah. So what kind of art were you into when you're doing foundation art? What was the art that was appealing to you?
Oh, all sorts. I've always liked Hieronymus Bosch, of course, and things like that. Nothing changes, but lots of, I suppose like pop art as well to a degree, but I think my taste of core taste have sort of haven't really changed, like pre-Raphaelites and and sort of surreal things, Yeah, the more I've got into surrealism, the more I've found more artists that I really like.
Like which ones?
Well, when I was young, Magritte for a start, and Dali, and everyone had, metamorphoses of Narcissus on their walls and things. So, yeah, and you think, wow. And
so, would Hieronymus Bosch be your favourite painter then?
Pretty much, yeah.
Would you find a parallel between his painting and your love of black metal?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I'm sure a few black metal bands have had him on the cover.
Yeah, but even the way they sound is what his paintings look like.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, do you find that art and painting and music, do you find that they're very entwined?
They are, yeah, and also I listen to music when I'm making art, so I suppose you do get influenced. I sometimes have to try and do something sort of nice, and
just can't.
I did there was a rose, I've got a rose bush outside my front door, and I sort of painted this rose, and then I did a skull over it. It's quite effective, actually.
So were you quite a dark person when you were growing up then?
Yeah, well, I was mad on horror films and things, and I remember I was a little kid, and my father used to bath me every Sunday. I think those were the days. And used to make up stories about witches and wizards and ghosts and skeletons, and poor man, be racking his brains. And he even got to the point where, like, if he was going to be in the office and mother had to do it, he'd like make up a story on his dictaphone, so I'd be playing while I was in the bath.
So bass guitar was the thing you first played. So what bass players did you like? This is pre-punk, and we talk about 74, 75 here.
Just any of the ones that I'd seen down in Devon. It was Stoner from Doctors of Madness, Heavy Metal Kids, and Portland. It was Lemmy, wasn't it? So, yeah, just whoever. It's just what. And of course, as soon as I moved to London, we used to go and see the Stranglers nearly every week up in Nashville, just standing in front of JJ Burnell going,
how did you do that?
I know. Particularly Walk On By, you would do it, and you're just going,
The bit in the middle of all the little mad little runs. Yeah, that's quite a big jump, though, from someone just playing a bass to...
Absolutely, yeah, I didn't try that.
Yeah. So with bands like Hawkwind, would they make it down to where you lived?
Yeah, Hawkwind would, yes. Yeah.
Would that be the big event, Hawkwind?
Yeah.
They're quite a key band for you, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, also, that's when I first met Lemmy, because they were playing at Exeter University, and sort of hitchhiked up with my boyfriend at the time, and to go and see them, and went to buy a ticket. They wouldn't sell you a ticket unless you were a student or knew a student to sign you in. So we're just standing outside going, The band came along and said, "What's the matter? We can't buy a ticket." And they went, "Oh, come in with us." So I thought, how nice, So,
So what was Lemmy like? Was he...
Right, yeah.
So when you finally got to London, did he remember you from Devon?
I can't even remember that, but we were all kind of quite... Some reason Motorhead fitted in with the punk scene, and
well,
everybody knew him.
They're one of the greatest punk bands, aren't they?
Yeah.
And in a way, you sort of look like sort of a girl version of Lemmy, didn't you? Same kind of look, though, wasn't it? Yeah.
I suppose, yeah.
And did you have that look at the time in 74, 75?
I didn't. I always kind of looked the same, but I guess I gradually evolved. I never done anything conscious, but.
So it was the classic look, your leather jacket, the jeans. Did you, and the makeup as well? Like the eyes, was that, you know, the panda eye thing? Was that?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously got darker.
Yeah.
You know, but over a period of time, wasn't really aware of it. You know? And I'd always worn like, you know, sort of black t-shirts and jeans, and you know, never really changed. I borrowed that jacket off. It was never mine actually. When I wore it, was belonged to D.B. Smith's friend Keith. He never got it back.
He never got it back.
But it got stolen when we were on tour in Ireland once, and I didn't see it again for about 15 years when it was posted back. And it
Posted back?
Yeah, in a parcel, and it got, imagine like covered in gob. It smelled horrible. So,
Did it have a little letter saying, "Sorry, I stole your jacket"?
No.
No, it just anonymously came back. You know,
So it kept on growing mould in my wardrobe. So I hung it out on a fence post in the garden for years, and you know, spiders were living in it and everything. And then I gave it to, what's that guy called? That rock auction for the homeless, and they put it in this auction, and Tony Barber from the Buzzcocks bought it and had it restored.
Restored, like an ancient painting. Yeah. So where's it living now? The Crass House, wherever he lives.
Well, he lives in New York now, so
Yeah.
he's in one of his two houses over there, I reckon.
Yeah. It's funny how that jacket's quite iconic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's had a strange life.
Well, it's certainly got a story.
So what kind of people were you hanging out with in Devon at that time before you went to London?
Well,
Was it like the bikers, the freaks, the...
Oh, not really, well, more the hippie side. You know, when the local, you know, because my friends were more like had long hair, and then when skinheads came out, and they were all, you know, we're supposed to beat you up, and that silliness used to go on. But then when I was at art school, I suppose we just hang out with other art students and flatmates, and...
So what was art school like? Was that good? Was it a good art school?
Yeah, I can't say I was the hardest work in the world, because, you know, it was too much... you could have too much fun. But no, I enjoyed doing graphics, you know. I got a diploma at the end, so...
Is that where you met Tim? Was that at the art school?
Yeah, he just did 1 year, and I was in my third year.
Yeah. Was it, he had a band then, didn't he? Some sort of glam...
Yeah, Sleaze, they're called.
And did they play the art school?
Not the art school. They did a couple of ones around and about the Torquay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know when I first met him, but yeah.
Yeah. Were they any good?
Yeah, you know, I was quite keen on them.
Yeah. So you start going out with him, and then was always this idea going to London? We've got to escape somehow.
Well, I always wanted to move to London anyway, and that when I finished college, there wasn't really much in the way of jobs in graphic design in Devon. So that was one of the original reasons for moving, really, because by the time we actually got up here, you know, could have evolved into being in a band.
Yeah. So you were going to move here anyway?
Yeah.
But you just happened to move, what was it, early 76 you moved here?
May 76.
Yeah, so you got here and the whole punk thing was starting to happen.
Yeah.
Were you aware of that at all before you came here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you've been reading about it in the music papers?
Yeah.
Thinking, well, was that making
And that's what accelerated it as well.
Yeah, we've got to go, something is really happening now. Yeah. So what was your first sort of introduction to punk? What was the first review that you read?
Sex Pistols, I imagine.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but yeah. And of course,
famous We're Into Chaos review, the first review, I think it is, isn't it?
I can't remember which ones it was, but we'd read about them, and who else? The Vibrators started early, didn't they? And the Stranglers, of course, were going, and the Damned.
So you had a sense that there's a whole scene appearing of bands that kind of modern versions of bands from your generation doing the music that you'd already like, and Dogs of Madness you've got to feel a bit sorry for because they were kind of on the right path, but somehow they got brushed aside.
Then at that time they got supported by the Sex Pistols, and they thought, this is it. I loved them, you know.
They're a really good band, weren't
they?
Yeah. They did all the hard work on the circuit, and then got swept aside, didn't they? And also, I guess a lot of these bands get compared to the Stooges, and you're a big Stooges fan.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And how did you discover the Stooges?
One of my art school flatmates had the Stooges, and he had Raw Power. And he used to, they were invariably in my room, you know, and he'd like, "Where's my records? Oh, I've got them again." And he got New York Dolls as well. When I first met him, he was into it as well, so he used to.
So you kind of bonding over music.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to explain now how obscure these bands were, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously Iggy's everywhere these days, but that time...
Yeah, incredibly so.
To find a Stooges record, or find anybody on a Stooges record, was a rarity, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mind you, I'd come through Frank Zappa and things, you know.
Yeah.
You were saying, like, you know, I know you were, you know, you going on holiday to Devon. If you'd been a couple of years earlier, you might have seen us on the seafront singing along with like early Frank Zappa songs and trying to annoy the holiday makers. We used to like paint Zappa-ish gold over our jeans and things and all sorts of weird things. And, you know, like beef art down your sleeve. And
were they even bigger influences, would you say? Or was this all part of the pot, you know, Stooges, Zappa, beef art?
Well, no, I kind of like, the Stooges kind of took over from that. I was kind of evolving. I even sort of, you know, had a sort of Marley phase as well. Because, you know, when you get into something, you really get into it, don't you? So, you know, listen exclusively to that for a while and then you move on to something else. And, you know. But I think as soon as I heard that, you know, the Stooges, I think, wow, this is it, you know.
I mean, the Stooges must seem really exotic because, I mean, they only played, one show, one at the Scala show. They didn't really come over here very much to do anything. Yeah. And so was bands like Hawkwind and Dogs of Madness the closest you could get to that experience? The British bands, they're touring a lot, they even come to Devon. Was that the closest you could get to that feeling?
Yeah. But I would never actually have expected the Stooges or anything to actually play in Devon certainly, and Britain probably not, because it just seemed too, you know, far away somehow. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I mean, Dead Boys I used to really like, the Ramones, or, you know, the ones from, and it would just added a bit of an accessibility because they were, you know, in another continent, so.
Yeah. So when you start going out with a team, there's always sort of collection of music going on, and you're playing a bit of bass, but is there talk of you playing in a band? Are you going to go to London and make a band, or?
I can't really remember.
Or was it just you're just going to go to London?
It was just a kind of natural thing. I guess he was always going to be wanting to be in another band, and it's kind of, you know, and he was teaching me how to play bass, so it was actually we were kind of doing his songs, and then sort of got the other two. Well, it wasn't easy. I mean, he had a long time, especially for a drummer. It was long search, but yeah. It was really well timed because the Roxy had just opened up, and then so it was that, you know, the ideal place to play.
So you'd only been there a few weeks, hadn't you? Yeah. And then everything just sort of starts, doesn't it?
Yeah. You don't really realise when you're, you know, like, well, I think I've just turned 20, was I still 19? But, you know, you don't really think, but everything was like evolving so quickly.
It just seems normal.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, being on top of the pops after only a few months, you know, that seemed quite normal as well.
Yeah.
It's really different.
So when you first got to London, did you go out and see bands from the day you got there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what it was all about.
So which bands did you see? In the first week, what did you actually see?
Probably the Stranglers, and because they used to play at the National nearly every week. And we'd moved to Hammersmith, so you could, you know, it was like two stops on the tube, or you know, you could walk there. You could afford half a lager. Times have always been hard. And Sex Pistols, you know. The only bad thing then at that point was, there's no records out yet, so we can't hear any of it when we're not actually at a gig.
Yeah, so you have to remember what it sounded like in your head. Yeah.
Well, and that was more me actually, because I was, you know, I would sort of play when the records did come out and play them over and over again, and I don't think the rest of the band was so into it as me. Drove them mad.
Where did you first see the Pistols then? Was that in Nashville as well?
God, I can't remember which was the first place. I mean, I remember seeing them at the 100 Club Punk Festival, but I'd seen them before that. But I think it was the Notre Dame one. I don't think we could get into that. I think it was sold out or something. So it was all like around that time, but I don't remember exactly which Pistols one. And the Screen on the Green, of course.
Were you at that screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim always seemed to be like visiting his parents when all these really big gigs came on, you know. So I went on my own. I remember Paul Cook saying, "Will you be all right getting home?" I went, yeah, well, I'd forgotten it didn't start till midnight. Managed it somehow.
Just get the first tube back.
Yeah, well, actually, what happened in the end, I think, got night buses. Paul came up with a school friend of his. I was talking to him about it, actually, the other day, and he can't even remember this, because one of his school friends was there, and he said he lives in Hayes, so, you know, getting a night bus so you can go back that way, and so yeah, that's how I got back. So I wouldn't have been able to find a night bus, probably.
Yeah, we didn't have those in Devon.
No.
What a concept.
So buses, hardly.
So a gig like Screen the Green was a real sense that something was happening.
Yeah,
here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Clash at Buzzcocks.
Buzzcocks' first London gig.
Yeah.
And did you feel part of this at all, or do you feel very much like sort of like the country bumpkin from Devon who's kind of stumbled into this kind of bizarre.
Kind of bit in a way, because I didn't know very many people. I just knew the people in the bands because I'd go and see them all the time. But yeah, I suppose I just remember sort of observing more than sort of taking part in it. Somehow.
Did you want to take part in it, or were you just purely like more of a fan? You just like watching the bands?
Well, yeah, I'm happy being a fan. Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about to me.
But at this point in time, you're playing as well, aren't you? Or you started to get the band together?
Yeah, I started playing in Devon still. So then I think the first gig was just, at that time Andy was running the Roxy. All you had to do was say, can we have a gig? And he'll go, what's your name? Yeah, sure. We were.
And what was the first gig at the Roxy like?
It was great. It was just like, because it wasn't intimidating. The stage was only about, foot high or something. And it was just like, I've been there every week, for gigs anyway, so it's just like being at home.
Was that with Generation X, that?
I think it was, it was Chelsea. Yeah. It was, I knew the order somehow, but,
Were you nervous?
No, not really.
Because you've been to so many gigs, it just felt completely normal thing to do.
Yeah.
And what was it? Was there a crowd there? Was it like, was it packed? Was it busy?
I think so, as far as I remember, yeah. But they didn't look like stereotypical punks as people think of them now, because everybody's just finding themselves with the sort of assortment of stuff from charity shops and a few pairs of flares and things. And when you look at the pictures from all the old photo books, you can see there's no real uniform as yet.
The bands are always slightly more dressed up than the audience. That's
yeah. But some like X-Ray Specs, that's all like, wow, that's really cool. Of course, it's kept Clash and the Pistols.
Yeah. So was there a sense of camaraderie between the bands, or is it as well? Because you always paint it there's a big rivalry between the groups.
Yeah.
But I imagine it's probably different if you're if you're in a band.
I think everybody was very supportive.
Because you were always like big friends of the Downs, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, Brian maybe had a word with got us onto onto Stiff Records and things.
Was that Brian James?
I think he got Jake Riviera down to see us.
Yeah.
And of course then we did that never-ending tour with them.
It was about a 40-day tour.
Yeah.
Because I remember you once telling me that you went to London to see all these great gigs, but you ended up being in a band just touring around the rest of England.
I can't go to gigs anymore.
So you almost ended back to where you started. Yeah.
So bands that came out a couple of months after, I wasn't really aware of them because I was away all the time.
Yeah, because that tour was massive. Because people used to do proper huge tours at that time, didn't they? Play every single small town of Britain.
Yeah.
But that must have been exciting in its own way.
Yeah. It was an amazing experience.
But some nights are quite violent as well, weren't they?
Yeah.
People weren't quite getting it, were they?
Yeah. We were talking about that actually because I was out with Rat a few days ago. We were talking about Lincoln, the bad one. Where we barricaded in, and they were trying to batter the doors down, the locals, and they sort of like vandalised the van outside, slashed the tyres, slashed all that. Yeah, and they were all sort of like waiting outside for when we came out at the end.
Were these people actually at the gig, or people come to the gig?
Oh, they were waiting outside.
Yeah.
I don't think they managed to get in. Otherwise, God knows what would have happened.
So they just locked you into the venue till these people went off. Yeah.
But they were still there. I mean, Rat was talking about bits I don't even remember, like us all sort of lining up outside, and they were all just like working down this alley. Oh, God.
It was an incredibly violent country, wasn't it, in the 70s?
Yeah. I got off quite lightly actually because I know a lot of people got beaten up, didn't they?
Yeah.
And, I didn't. I think the worst thing that happened to me was got followed by 3 Teds going up King's Road. I was with Jane Suck and the journalist and this other guy who luckily turned out to be a Hells Angel. We sort of turned around and saw them off because they're getting closer and they're getting closer.
But didn't you? I remember you telling me once. Didn't Tim get attacked on the subway?
He did, yeah. And that was apparently because the guy came up and found me the next day. Weirdly enough, and he said, "Oh, I went for him because some punks beat up a friend of mine." And I said, "Well, it wasn't him, he hadn't done anything." And he went, oh, well, you know, I'll tell my mates to lay off you in future. He said, I only stopped because I laid into him, and then he apparently saw that his girlfriend was about to have a go at me and he didn't want her to get hurt, so that's what stopped it.
Which is a kind of level of stupidity at this point, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm still stupid like that. I'd still lay into people if they were hurting somebody. I think they're a bit doddery now. So very quickly you got the record deal, you're on tour, the singles come out, and the whole thing just sort of takes off, doesn't it? Yeah. And this feels completely natural, but does it feel exciting at any point? Kind of. It's almost like it's just what you expect, really. I suppose it was in places. It's more exciting when you got to see other bands, I think, somehow.
Yeah. I mean, you actually had proper hits, didn't you? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, Gary Gilmore's Eyes was a top 20 single, wasn't it?
Yeah. And my favourite point was doing the tour with Iggy Pop.
Yeah. Why is that? Just because you finally got to see him play.
You got to see him play every night afterwards.
What was he like to tour with?
Oh, he was quite chaotic. Yeah, good fun. Yeah.
In what way chaotic? Just.
Oh, I don't know. Impulsive.
Yeah.
I suppose. Yeah. It was only 2 nights at the Rainbow, and about 4 other dates. And Bristol, Birmingham, Newcastle, maybe.
So that must be pretty exciting to get. So somebody of all those years.
Yeah.
It seems so exotic.
Yeah.
You're actually on tour with.
Yeah. It's really great, you know, be playing and okay, when he's at the side of the stage watching. You know.
Did he actually watch that?
Yeah.
That's unusual, isn't it? Because bands at that level don't really care about the other bands, do they?
Yeah.
So did you speak to him much on that tour?
Yeah.
So was he a fan of the group?
Yeah, well, apparently there'd been some article in one of those women's magazines, like Honey or something. They'd done an interview with me about what's, you know, your domestic style, and they come out like, taking photos of the one bedroom. It was just a little attic room in a horrible, you know, sort of, you know, slum, and they're trying to comment on this, you know, the crappy furniture in this horrible little room. It wasn't anything to do with me, you know. It's just what it came with. But he'd seen that, and I've got like Iggy posters on the wall and things. So his first words were, I've been looking forward to meeting you," and I went, "It's my line."
So like, was like Lemmy a big support at this time when you finally went up again?
Yeah.
He's like, because at the time he's the incredibly ancient age of about 34, isn't he?
Yeah.
So was he like the old road warrior, for kind of bit of wisdom and stuff?
He was kind of like, you know, an honorary punk, sort of, you know, amongst the rest. But he's a great guy, and he lived. I think he was living at Man Portobello at the time, so it wasn't far to, you know, go and visit each other and that.
So what sort of things would he talk about with you? Would he, you know, about how to be in a band and how to survive on the road? Was he be like the wisdom?
Well. I remember one night I came home from somewhere and he was sitting on the stairs at the top of my you know, outside my flat, my room, and came in and we stayed up all night, him teaching me Motorhead on the bass. You know, I had it perfectly by the end of the night. Now 3 days later,
can't make it. I know how to play it. I'll show you if you want. So he would be taking care of these kind of young charges in a way.
Yeah. But he was just funny. Like, be like, you know, just a pile of pounds, and he'd be, well, however much it cost then, and you know, just one-arm bandits all the time, you know, with clubs and that. And like, you know, from the music machine, which is now Coco, you know, I think the guy that ran it would let me play pinball for nothing, something like that. So he's on his one-arm bandits and I'm on the pinball machines.
So was Lemmy a big fan of the Adverts?
I think he liked us,
Yeah. He's always championed the Damned and the Ramones.
Yeah.
So the Adverts is quite fast, isn't it? It's a bit like the Damned were, but they somehow managed to get Chapter 2 in, didn't they? Whereas you did 2 albums and it just completely sort of went, didn't it? It's like you had your moments and then it had gone.
Yeah.
Even though the second album was really good.
Yeah.
People couldn't concentrate enough.
Well, it was
albums.
too different at the time for people, I think, and also like there was only me and Tim left. There was one drummer got sacked, and I think the other one got sacked as well. I'm not sure what for. And Howard just disappeared one day, the guitarist, because apparently he's disillusioned with not getting bigger and bigger, because he likes stuff like Rory Gallagher and, you know, mainstream sort of things, and, you know, getting sort of like temporary people in, and it's kind of ground to a halt. And Tim wanted to do something more musically, you know, complicated.
It's amazing how impatient people were, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. People are thinking they should be bigger than they are, even though they're quite big. People thinking the band's changed slightly, I can't listen to this.
Yeah.
Because when you actually listen to that second album now, it doesn't sound massively different, does it? It's not that. It's a jump.
Yeah,
it's not,
it's not so rock.
No, it's not like it sort of goes way over there somewhere, is it? Yeah.
There's lots more production, you know, layers of things and keyboards, and I guess people weren't geared up to it.
Yeah. And what did you think of it?
Well, again, I was sort of, I'd always gone for the more basic things. But I mean, I appreciated it, of course.
So would you prefer the first album?
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah. So when it all kind of fizzled out, you kind of stopped, didn't you?
Just felt a bit, I was always under scrutiny for being female, and I used to really hate that. And you know, I know journalists and things. And
was it because it was quite leery in a way? Or was it?
I just had enough really at the time. So
Yeah.
kind of,
I mean, because you became...
I took the 80s off.
You were kind of an iconic presence in punk rock, but it's not something you ever wanted, really,
No,
is it?
no.
Yeah. Did it cause tension as well, didn't it?
Well, yeah, it did, yeah.
That your picture was bigger than everyone else's at the time.
Yeah. And I didn't like it any more than anybody else.
So that's double bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're kind of stuck with this role that you don't really want.
Yeah.
And would people expect you to take that role on as well?
I wouldn't do it, but, you know.
Or is it just like you think, well, why's my picture everywhere?
Yeah. Well, you know, we were all completely gobsmacked when we saw the first single.
Yeah.
You know, the Barney Bubbles.
But it looks good though. It's a great piece of artwork, isn't it?
So I refused to be on the second one. There's a picture of the other three, and there's a picture of my bass.
Yeah. To get the balance. Yeah. So you were never actually ever interested or tempted to just run with that sort of role at all?
No, it's not what I wanted. I just wanted to be a musician. I always kind of hung out with males anyway, so, you know, the gangs I was with, you know, I'd never gone in for knitting or anything, or, you know, I didn't know. I mean, obviously I had female friends at school and things, but yeah, it's more of a music thing, and I think the guys I knew were more into the music than the girls I knew. So.
Was it because if you got a role being like a female punk icon, people weren't taking you serious as a musician? Was that something that would grate a bit?
Well, yeah.
That people just think, oh, she's only in the band because she has a look or something. Was the 70s really that bad?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, the band, with other bands it was fine, but it was the journalists and things that were a bit sort of stuck in their ways, I suppose. Yeah,
it's funny when you read a lot of the old articles from the 70s now, they seem really, really old-fashioned, don't they?
Yeah.
The writing, you think, God, no one would say anything like that now, would they?
Yeah.
So is that one of the factors that sort of put you off continuing after the adverts? Or was it just... I mean,
I couldn't, you know, I was never one to... I've always kind of fallen into things. I'm never really proactive in doing things. Same with my art career, you know. I've, you know, sort of like... I don't sort of say, can I be in your show or anything? I get asked to be in shows, so I'm in shows, but I can't be pushy, you know. Probably a fear of rejection, I suppose.
So you spend, 20 years after that just doing a proper job, don't you?
Yeah, 17 years local authority.
And were you happy with that because you could actually go and watch bands?
Yeah,
you went to watch bands. Now you can finally watch bands instead of being in one.
Yeah.
And did your music taste keep up with things, or did you?
I think I've kind of like got a bit. The 80s lapsed a bit. There's only things like that, like Jesus Mary Chain and things like that I like. But I think it sounds stereotypical, but when I first heard Spells Like Teen Spirit in '91, Nirvana, I just thought, wow, you know, and it sort of made my ears flap, as it were, you know, and I had nothing out for a while. So, although I didn't get access to much stuff, because, so then I started, you know, discovering things again, and, you know, just sort of following whatever I could, whatever thing, you know, that work colleagues would let me hear, or radio programs like Gary Crowley or Radio 1 Rock Show and things like that, and I'd sort of find things from that, and just sort of
You'd be at Reading. I remember you were always at Reading Festival.
Yeah.
Wasn't that your birthday present?
Yes, the day of my choice, I could take it.
But not only there, but running around with a programme, running around watching loads of bands.
Oh God, yeah. We have to be here. We have to be there. Yeah, and then I kind of went beyond Reading Festival and took Download, and then kind of went beyond that as well.
To the black metal, to the pit. Yeah. So that's quite an interesting swerve, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what was it?
It wasn't conscious. I mean, in a way, I wish I'd been,
Was that because it's the only music that had that darkness that appealed to you?
Yeah, I've just had no input into what was drawn to really, and there's not very much of it that I do like, but when I know when there's something I like, I know that's what I want to listen to. And
what was the first black metal you really listened to?
I think the first time I had the Radio 1 Rock Show, Mary Ann Hobbs played Satyricon, and I like those guitars. It's guitar sound I like with most of it. It's the vocals can just be like another instrument or something, but it's the best of it to me has got these really lovely sort of guitar riffs and things that you just, and repetitive ones as well, like contemporary bands like Mgła, MGLA, they're Polish. They're very like hypnotic and repetitive, but in a brilliant way, and it just kind of evolves the melodies. There'll be like sort of two different melodies going in and out, and it's
It is actually the best of it's actually quite beautiful music. It's not a load of people shouting and hitting things really hard. It's almost like classical music, isn't it?
Yeah.
But very dark.
Yeah.
Was it the darkness that appealed to you? Back to the
I guess so. Yeah.
Thing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like other things as well. I mean, these days and I've also liked things like My Bloody Valentine, and since I got into them as well, and all sorts of things like that. Things that sort of just a bit different. I've never been into mainstream sort of stuff that much, or stereotypical anything of any genre really. I don't think.
To get back into music, gradually going back into it, finding these kind of really odd little scenes everywhere. Is that what's inspired you to start doing your art again?
Partly, yes, and also partly because I was made redundant, so I've got early retirement, and so more time to explore things and do that as well. But yeah, I kind of started to go and I can't remember how long ago, but started to go to lots of art shows. I sort of look at what artists are showing and go and see them, and you get to know what sort of things are available and what's the current art scene, and there's some things that really appeal to me. That.
And what was it that sparked you to actually make your own art? I mean, going to these art shows, or was there something inside that you just had to create these things?
Well, combination of everything really. I think sort of getting inspired by other people and having ideas and just all sort of like merging together.
I mean, initially the first art I saw you was the bones, the little bones.
Yeah.
Was that the first stuff you started doing, or was it that?
Collages with three-dimensional ones, and I do like doing things like that. Just using stuff that was. I think it's kind of like honouring, and it was being vegetarian part-time vegan, honouring sort of animals that by sort of finding old bones, and because there used to be a lot of slaughterhouses, particularly around Gabriel's Wharf, say, in the banks of the Thames, and you get lots of bones in there, and it's quite nice to make something beautiful out of it. I'm also very inspired by sort of ossuaries, that the ones where they use bones in incredible patterns. It's like the Capuchin church in Rome, and there's one in Palermo.
I've been to it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's absolutely freaky.
Yeah. And I've just been to Sedlec in the Czech Republic with a sort of bone chandelier. Fantastic. So, yeah, I'm really into that. I spent ages like trying to find matching ribs to do those sort of patterns that they have in.
Is it the patterns, or is it the?
It's what you could. What it
symbolises, because it's kind of making life out of death, or is it?
It is, yeah. But also like the just the patterns. It's just So those monks, you know, what inspiration they had.
I said, but your art now has moved on from there, and you do different kinds of art.
I tend to do, I'm doing a lot of photographic stuff, so I'll take photos of things and sort of layer them on my laptop and do sort of like, it's kind of like collages, but I'm doing it sort of electronically. I still do, you know, physical ones, but generally like two-dimensional, so, you know, sort of like paper rather than... you can only make so much before it starts to take over your home, and so I should have an agent trying to sell it.
So that's quite a swerve, isn't it? Like, it's quite a different type of art. I mean, how did you end up doing that?
It's still a bit, well, it's quite similar in a way. It's just more two-dimensional now.
Yeah, but you must have to learn how to do that. You must have to learn how to use your laptop. Or is that just press it, what does this do? Press that button. What does that do? That looks good.
It's very basic function. I've not got Photoshop or anything. To be honest, it was Martin Stacey, you know, Bermondsey Joyriders Punk Rock and Roll Art Show. You know, he'd done some things on his pages, and he said, "You can do." I didn't know it did that. So he's going, "Oh yeah, you can do this," and I said, "Right." Yeah. And it's amazing, you know, with you know, tape, you know, using your own photographs and things, what you can come up with. It's great, you know. You can't go to bed, you know, in any reasonable hour when you know, in the middle of that, because I just go on for hours.
You just get lost in it. The way that you get entranced and lost in the rabbit hole of music when you're a teenager, is this what you like with art now?
Yeah.
Well, creating art, or even just going to look at art, somebody else's art.
Oh, well, I love looking at it as well. You know, I write lists out of shows that are on, and I get all twitchy if they finish before I get to see them. And I've just seen Rachel McLean, do you know her?
Another name.
Yeah, Scottish video artist, and it's really incredible. Current thing at the National Gallery, but there's also other films on at the Bloodwitch collection up in Chalk Farm, and just really, really, she's really talented. And she'll play the parts, and you wouldn't know it's the same person, and produce it, direct it. Excellent.
So your relationship with art is the same as your relationship with music. You're like a fan who can actually create it as well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, is it, or do you think it's a better balance because you actually make the art now, don't you?
Yeah.
You're not playing based on someone else's songs.
Yeah,
this is
but
your
then
art,
again,
your
we
statement.
heard like stuff like that. I'm not a filmmaker, you know, but I love that. But also, you know, I you know, all sorts of artists. You know, there's just anything that's a bit sort of like just catches my attention, really. So,
do you think you're primarily a fan, or do you think you're a creative person, or
I'm a fan, and I like contrasts, and you know, most of my work's about sort of juxtaposition, and you know, there's this element, but look, see what happens if you balance it with this, and
to create attention.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm coming from all the time, really.
And you said you listen to music when you're creating art. I mean, do you make a conscious choice of the music you put on to affect the art you're going to make?
Not always, no, but nothing too raucous generally, but otherwise I'd be making really
yeah. Or you just couldn't concentrate. Yeah. So what kind of things would you listen to when you...
well, again, that sort of melodic, like Maguire, or that ambient-y sort of band called Ectra, ECHTRA, and just sort of atmospheric things more.
What did you tend to find that opens your imagination up?
Yeah. Although I get so engrossed anyway, and I quite end up doing it in silence. But
do you actually get lost in the image that you're working on?
Yeah.
I mean, you ever attempted to actually do any more music yourself, going back the other way around? Not talking about punk rock or anything like that, but ambient metal, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you've got the music to make the art to, but what about the other way around? The art to make the music to?
I think the time would have been. I'm a bit. I've got a bit osteoarthritis in my thumbs now. You know, I couldn't really, you know, play to, you know, any sort of decent level. So. Did
you get musical ideas in your head like you get art ideas?
Yeah, but I don't. You know. I don't know. I don't have the urge to. I've never had the urge to perform really, and I'm just, you know, happy to think there's so many people out there. It's nice discovering things. And
why did you not like performing at the time?
Well, I was never, you know, I never really liked being looked at.
I can never tell if you looked like you was really hard or totally terrified. You know, like a lot of people have that thing, don't they, when they're on a stage?
I don't like having my picture taken. And stop spitting at me.
So you just worked out a way of looking to push people away?
Well, yeah, it wasn't a conscious thing.
It was a very punk thing, though, wasn't it? A lot of people...
As it turned out, yeah.
Because people hadn't really learned how to be showbiz, had they? They were just normal people in very unusual situations.
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't, do all that try. Like I said, I'm not really one to be sort of pushing one, So I kind of like go away.
So you'd be quite happy to make your art and nobody ever saw it?
Yeah.
You just make you pure.
It's nice getting praise from like
of course,
showing it to friends.
It's nice getting money and praise, but it's not the primary thing. You have to make the arts. You're driven to make it in a way, aren't you?
Well, I do. I do get really into it, but no, it's really rewarding when people say they like it and things. So.
More rewarding if they pay for it. Isn't
Oh
it?
yeah. Yes, I'm not good at pushing it.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Gaye. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.